Hello and welcome to the This Works For Me Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Fernpate Watson. I am the director of the Faculty Development Center at Murray State University. Are you looking for a strategy to help you serve as a leader? Our guest today, David Balthrop, will be providing you with some strategies to do so. David, thank you very much for taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. I'm going to open the floor to you for a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
I am originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and I went to Eastern Kentucky University for my undergraduate degree and received that as a bachelor's in theater. I went to the University of Cincinnati, received a master's degree and a master's of fine arts degree. Both of those are in theater. Specifically scenic and lighting design. After that, I began my teaching career at Millikan University in Illinois, and then at Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia. And then I came here, where I've served as the Department of Theater Chair for 24 years-ish, and now I'm the Dean at the College of Humanities and Fine Arts here at Murray State.
Wow, and I know that you have a wealth of experience, and I really like the title of your strategy. In fact, when I saw it, I have to say that it really spoke to me. And I thought to myself, you know, if he didn't say anything else, you would have given me enough food for thought. So I'm just looking forward to delving more into this strategy with you. So the title of your strategy is Creating Trust in Leadership and Leading for the Greater Good. How do you define leadership?
I think that leadership is the opportunity to build trust with a group, and then by building that trust and having that trust, they then allow you to lead them in the direction that is necessary. There have been a lot of books written about leadership, and I've read quite a few of them, a lot of them actually, and when I finished at the end of the day, I really don't think that it's that difficult. I think it's a matter of finding that trust, finding that group that wants you to work with them and to assist them. So for me, leadership is building trust and then maneuvering that group of people along with you, or letting them lead and you following and supporting that.
Yeah, that is so true. And I know that you have served in various leadership capacity. And before we get right into your strategy, could you help us understand what factors do you consider when you are choosing certain leadership roles?
I have always looked for service roles, things that assisted with the greater good. I don't want to be a leader in a small sort of group situation necessarily, and I want to know that what I'm going to do is going to have an impact on a wide circle of influence. I want to know that it's going to serve longer than I am. Mm-hmm. I think that you juggle more when you have that kind of an opportunity. You juggle more. It's more difficult. There's a lot of things going on all the time.
Yeah.
But I think that's what leads you down the path of understanding what that service role is and how you can best assist all the people. So for me, it has to be about the greater good, and it has to be a service type role.
So are there leadership roles that you have refused or left?
There are. My best example of that is probably in another situation at another institution. The term leadership was used at times by some of the members of that administration as an opportunity to manipulate, which I don't believe that that's what good leadership is about. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of an insidious environment, which led me to choose not to remain in that position. Mm-hmm. I just decided that I would rather lead a group somewhere who actually wanted to move, wanted to have forward progress, wanted to do things other than serve their own cause. So yes, I have chosen not to, and chosen to step away from leadership positions where I just didn't feel like there was a lot of support.
Yes.
Not for what I wanted to do.
Yes, I certainly understand. Now, let's get into the very first part of your two-part strategy, which is creating trust in leadership. How did you come to see trust as an important leadership strategy, and how has it worked for you?
I think trust is most important. I don't think that you can actually lead, whatever that term might mean to someone, if the people who are working with you don't trust you. I don't see how you can do that. And if you look at major corporations, you can see track records of people who don't have a lot of trust. They don't last very long in a leadership role. So trust to me is most important. And I try to build that by making sure that I ask for things that I need, not necessarily things that I want. So administrators know when I come to them, if I have a request, if I have a need, it's truly a need. The best example I can give you of that is when I was the chair of theater. I'd been chair of theater for about 10 years. And we started talking about national accreditation. And the National Association of Schools of Theater was the route for that. And our department debated it, and we talked about it, and it was going to mean money, frankly. We had to hire at least 2 new faculty members. We were going to need some facilities upgrades. And so we talked about it, decided it was the priority. I went to the provost at the time and the dean at the time and said, we'd like to do this. We think it will better our university. It will better our reputation. It will better our recruitment. But we need these amount of money is for our facility upgrades, and we're going to need at least 2 faculty members to meet these standards that NAST has. And the dean and the provost were very responsive to that. They reviewed the proposal. They talked to me about it for what I didn't consider to be very long for that type of a decision on their part. And they supported the request. And I truly feel they supported the request because they knew when I came to them, it was a serious endeavor. We really thought this would be beneficial and helpful to the department, the college, and the university. And so I think that trust won that day.
Yes, and as I listened to you explain what happened, I could see that because you were not demanding in the past, they realized that this was a very important request that you were making. And I imagine that because of your decision during that process even led to further trust with them in the future too.
I would hope so, because it played out, I think, as they wanted it to play out. Our numbers did grow. The number of students that we brought to the department certainly offset the cost that they had for the faculty members that they allowed us to hire. That department is still NAST accredited, even though I'm not the chair. They just finished an accreditation visit that went very well. So I think that the ramifications of that trust have rippled through for another 10 to 15 years.
Wow, that's good. So how do you build trust with the different groups that you work with on a day-to-day basis?
That's a tough one.
I know.
And especially talking in an area of higher education, you have that sort of ingrained distrust from faculty members to administrators, and sometimes from administrators to administrators, depending on where you are. We're lucky we don't have that here. But that's difficult. I think the number one way to build that trust and to work well with those people is to be a really good listener. That old saying of, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. I think that that's really the case. I think that if you prove to be a good listener and you can respond to what you're being told and asked to do, as opposed to sort of only listening and formulating at the same time what someone's saying to you and just saying, well, we're going to do this, without taking the opportunity to really talk and listen and debate, I think that's detrimental. So I think for me, the number one thing is to make sure I'm listening really, really well to what I'm being told.
Wow.
Then get out of the way. Step 2 is to listen, help them figure this out, decide which direction you want to go, then get out of the way and let the people who are in the positions to do it, let them get it done. And then third, I think the final thing is you have to praise that success. You have to celebrate your success. And I think a lot of time leaders don't do that too often. I think we're put in positions of always dealing with the bad, but you have to celebrate what you do well.
Wow. I like what you're saying here, I'm listening, empowering people, getting out of the way. I mean, these are excellent strategies. So let's now turn our attention to the second part of this two-part strategy, leading for the greater good.
Okay.
Why is the greater good, leading for the greater good, important to you as a leader?
I don't want to be in a position to lead and step out of a leadership position and not have the ramifications of that live beyond my time in the leadership role. I think that's self-serving. I think that's short vision, frankly. So I want to serve the greater good because I think that's going to continue far beyond the time that I spend in the actual leadership role. That's why it's important to me. It doesn't mean much to me to walk in here on a daily basis to my office, and when I walk out at 4:30, know that after 4:30, nothing's going to matter tomorrow that I did today. I want to know that what I do today is going to mean more in the future than it does right this very second. So leading for the greater good, to me, that's the way to get there.
So what would be an example of you, leading for the greater good?
Well, I spent a long time running the Department of Theater from 1993 to 2017 or so. And no one knew this at the time, but I had decided to no longer serve as the chair of that department. That just happened to coincide with this job coming open, so I was able to fortunately move from the chair to win the dean's position, which I'm very thankful for.
Wow.
But I had decided to step aside from serving as the chair of the Department of Theater because for the greater good,
Wow.
I had done my time there. They needed new blood. They needed new ideas. They needed opportunities to come around again that perhaps I had said, no, the time's not right for that. Well, maybe the time is right now. And so I had decided for the greater good of that department, I needed to step away and let someone else come in and take over.
Wow.
And before I could announce that, I was able to get into this office and to lead from here. So it all worked out really well. But that's the best example I can have for you of leading for the greater good, and that's a very personal one for me.
That's an excellent example. It's a very deep one, and I'm really glad it worked out. Not just for the greater good in general, but even for you personally, because that's a noble decision for you to even think about to do.
Well, from Faith, I think it would have worked out whether I had gone to the dean's office or not, because I think the department would have been in better shape and would be able to move forward at a quicker pace. I think that for me personally, if I was going back to the classroom, that would have been okay for me, and that also would have been for the greater good because I could serve the department in different ways. So yes, getting the dean's job, I'm very happy about that. I'm excited still very much about being in this role. But the greater good would have come no matter what when I decided that I was done being the chair.
Wow, well said, well said.
Well, thanks.
So have you had to make any decision that seemed as if it was not for the greater good?
Yes, and for that answer, I will go straight to budget. It seems like whenever you're dealing with the budget, in the short term, sometimes you're not looking at the greater good. You're looking at a short-term fix for an issue that's come up, or a problem, or budget shortfall, whatever it might be. But I always seem to find that I have to be extra special and very carefully thinking about budget decisions that don't look like they're going to be for the greater good. And by that I mean, yes, there's an immediate decision that might have to be made. It might have a negative ramification right now. But you always have to keep in mind, what is that going to mean 5, 6, 7 years from now? How can we make this decision turn into something for the greater good? Maybe that's by negotiating well at the front end and saying, okay, fine, we can do this now, but I need a promise from you that as we move forward, we're going to be able to try to do this instead. Again, you wrap that back into that trust factor that comes in. They have to be able to trust that you're going to do that, and then you have to trust that they're going to follow through as well. So a lot of times the financial decisions don't seem really for the greater good in the short term. So you just have to make sure you keep a long-term vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, especially also keeping the trust factor intact when you're making such decisions.
Yes, that's very important.
Yeah. What would you say to our viewers who might be interested in building trust as a leader and leading for the greater good, but they're not quite sure where to start, or they're a little bit hesitant? Because, I mean, you let it sound, a little bit easy, but for some people, it's not that easy. What would you say to someone who needs help in these areas?
First of all, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. That first step is going to be the most difficult. You're going to feel the most self-conscious. So don't hesitate. Just go ahead and try that. And then from there, I think you move into leadership in place, which for the last 5 or 6 years has been something you hear about quite a bit, especially in higher education. As money gets tighter and administrative positions are not doled out like they used to be, there are people who have to lead in place. That's a great place to start. Grassroots efforts, especially at a place like a university, can make a lot of headway just by saying, this is something I think is important. This is what I want to do next. And so how do I get the people together to make this happen? How do I push this out? You don't have to be a chair or a dean to do that. You can be in the ranks of any institution and decide, these are the things that I want to do. So my suggestion is to start wherever you are, lead in place. You're in your comfort zone. You're working with people that you know most of the time. And you're working with something that's close to your heart, something that you really feel empowered to do. So start there. Start where you are, lead in place, and then push it out. People will notice your leadership skills at that point, and then you become a go-to. And that then changes your style, obviously, when they're asking you to lead. But start small, start in place.
Yeah. Exactly, I like that. Start small. Sometimes we want to move the mountain when we're trying to develop certain skills, but that's great advice you're giving us here. Now, are there any resources that you recommend for our viewers to look at?
There are several, and I'll make sure that you get copies of these so you can put them out there for everybody. One of my favorite books, and actually I've been a leader for a while before I read this book, so it speaks a lot to someone who's new in leadership or has been in there for a while, is a book called Leadership in Place. It's edited by John Bergen. It's an easy read. It's got shorter chapters which are broken down to very specific responsibilities that you can deal with or you will have to deal with. And it talks about small. It talks about starting small. So I highly recommend that book. I also recently read Sir Alex Ferguson's biography. He was the general manager for the Manchester United football team in the UK in the Premier League. And his book is entitled Leading, Learning from My Life and Years at Manchester United. And my son, who's a big football fan, actually picked that up, and I jumped on it before he did and started reading it. Initially because I wanted to understand more about the insides and the workings of Premier League football, because I watched that a lot. And what I found was that Sir Alex Ferguson's leadership skills speak far beyond sports, and they speak far beyond anything that has to do with actual football. It's very universal in its tone, and also very specific in some of his strategies. So I've read that book twice now in about the last 18 months, and it's a good read. It's a fast read, and I highly recommend it. So those would be good places to start.
Wow, thank you very much for sharing these resources. And of course, I'll be linking to the titles of these books for you. So in the final minute or so of this conversation, could you leave our viewers with an encouragement or a challenge?
Yes, both. Um, I would encourage you to start leading no matter where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Pick something that is vital to you in your job. Mm-hmm. And if you're in higher ed, try something that means a lot. For example, look for an example that does a lot of dealing with students. Something that you're impassioned about dealing with your students, and figure that out. It could be something as small as, how do I find more money to take students on undergraduate research events? How that's leading in place. As soon as you establish that, then great, you move on. Your department can move on with that. So start small, find something that speaks to you. Mm-hmm. I encourage that for sure. In terms of a challenge, I think the challenge right now for leaders is to make sure you stay very focused, mm-hmm. and that you always keep the long-range vision intact. Mm-hmm. That we're so inundated with, this has to be solved right now. We have to make sure we make this decision. While I do at times adhere to being a one-minute manager, which is another good book, by the way, I also think that we have to be very careful. And so I challenge those of us who are leaders to make sure that we're looking way down the road for how we best serve our students, how we best serve our faculty and staff, what's best for our organizations. Things turn so fast now that I think we have to pay a lot of attention to long-term goals.
Wow. Well said. You have provided us with some real practical strategies today. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today, David.
It's been my pleasure. I appreciate you asking me. And if I can do anything in the future, please let me know. Happy to help.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And to our viewers, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this conversation. And I encourage you to share it with others. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this virtual summit. See you soon.